All right. Hi, guys. This is the sixth episode of Aspire to Inspire Live. This week, we're very, very lucky to have Tommie Sunshine as our guest this week, and he obviously is well known for just his character within the industry and his music as well. And he's got a lot to talk to us about for this episode. So really, we'll kind of just jump right into it and start, kind of with the basis of his experience in the music industry and the electronic scene throughout the years. So, Tommie, my first question for you is, from when you were involved, as a teenager in the scene, more on the basis of a fan, to where you are right now. What are some of the biggest changes that you've seen throughout the years as electronic music is concerned?
Well, I mean, when I first got into this, the only reason to be a part of it was the fact that it was subculture. There was nothing mainstream about it. Like, everything was completely underground. Things were thrown in illegal spaces. They were, in the bad parts of town. Like, everything about it was left of center and counterculture. And, obviously, over time, as the popularity of things do, it brought things into more of the mainstream. And, obviously, we're not breaking into warehouses to throw parties anymore.
Right.
We're partying in football stadiums and on racetracks and in fairgrounds. And obviously, that's, something that I always courted. I always wanted that. I was one of the earliest supporters of, kind of this being for everybody and it not being, so exclusive. I always wanted everyone to come to the party.
Right.
I didn't think that it needed to be exclusionary. But, now of course, we went from, the absolute most left of center subculture, which, everyone kind of forgets, started as Black and Latino gay music. So, this all came from such incredible roots and has such a rich history. And, to come from that, and now, there are publicly traded companies on the stock exchange. This is something that, is, well, obviously it took a very long time to get from A to B. This year, 2015, is the 30th anniversary of the first house record going #1 in the UK. A Chicago house record called Love Can't Turn Around by Farley, Jackmaster Funk, and Daryl Pandy went #1 30 years ago this year.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. So anybody who thinks this is like the Emperor's New Clothes is sadly mistaken, because it's been around for a long, long time.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think the interesting thing is there's editorials everywhere nowadays, and how it's gotten too big, it's too mainstream, and there's so many issues within the electronic industry right now.
Sure.
And some of that has merit, and you can be critical of it, but I think as you said earlier, having seen or having been with it since kind of day one, you always had that idea of, I'd love to see it on a bigger scale. I'd love to see more people appreciate the music for what it is, as opposed to, other reasons per se, and we can get into that later. But my other question in this regard then would be, is there anything currently that you'd like to change about the industry, as far as, is there anything you liked how, in the past that you'd almost want to revert back to? Or just anything else in general?
Well, I mean, there's a lot to learn from what's happened thus far. But I'm not a revivalist. I am not anyone. I'm not the kind of person that looks backwards. And I've always had my eyes set to the future since the very beginning of this. I think everybody that was involved in the beginning of this was steeped in the future. The first kind of chat rooms and rave lines and things like that. Midwest raves and Northwest raves, like one of the very strongest chat communities, was first started with ravers. So I mean, like we always had our sights set at the future, and just for anybody who's wondering, like, I am a raver. I consider myself still a raver. Like there is nothing about the fact that now I make music and I run a record label and do all these other things within the industry, but I'm still a raver. Like I still love this music. I live for house music. House music saved my life. So I mean, it's not don't ever misconstrue the fact that because it's farther down the road that these things have changed. What would I like to see, evolve? Two things. One, I would like to see a more current presentation of Plur. I think that, that is a bit outdated, rooted in its 60s ideals, and, so much of culture has changed, and so much of the way that the kids negotiate their place in this has changed. No one who's 43 years old should have a hand in what that should turn into. That's for the kids to figure out. But I feel like it's time to kind of renegotiate that and how it applies to the current state of the music. And I think that, too, I think it's very important that everybody stop shooting for the middle. I think that everybody, and the onus is on everybody with this, because this is not only blogs, it's not only the media, it's not only the people who are throwing the parties, and it's not only the producers, but it's it's also the taste of the people who are listening to the music. Everyone's stuck in this very safe middle place right now, and I feel like that's just about to change. I feel like people are getting restless. I think they want deeper, darker, weirder music. I think they want harder music to go with the times. We're living in a very topsy-turvy world that's pretty fucked up. So the music needs to reflect that. The music needs to be hard, and it needs to be aggressive, and it needs to show the chaos that's going on around the world. And I think that's coming.
Right. Now, out of curiosity, from more of a musical perspective, do you have any sort of idea or prediction? It's actually hard to even generate an idea, but I guess some sort of prediction on what that new sound could be. I know you mentioned it'd be more aggressive and dark, but is there any hunch you have right now?
Oh, America best be ready for hardstyle, because it's about to come kick its ass. Like, I mean, it's time for that music. Like, people are finally at the place with this music where they can handle that, and I think that it's going to come, and it's going to be a more intelligent wave of it. And it's really going to take the kids by storm, because, I mean, come on. Like, if I was a teenager, I wouldn't want to hear Guetta. You know what I mean? Like, that would make no sense to me. Like, I mean, Guetta's great.
Right.
Ultimate respect. But, like, that's not music for kids. You know what I mean? Like, that is mainstream pop music at this point. So, I think the kids need to be seeking out the really hard stuff. And I mean, in a time of deep house and things getting deeper, like, my music personally is getting harder and harder. But I think that has everything to do with, my participation in the streets and my activism and everything else. So I feel like the world is waking up to a lot of things, and I think that these new genres are amongst the things it's waking up to.
Definitely. I think that's actually a very good kind of analysis on where we are now, or where we are currently, and potentially where we'll kind of end up. I definitely agree with a lot of what you had to say there. And kind of moving backwards, actually, instead of moving forwards, going back in time, when you were still a student in high school, you mentioned that you were very, very adamant about being involved in the rave scene and being a rave kid yourself. So at that point in time, what was the experience like? I mean, you mentioned earlier that it was generally in kind of underground venues, and the whole vibe behind it was quite underground and kind of rebellious. But yeah, kind of elaborate on that and tell us any specifics that you had or you remember from your high school years.
Well, I mean, the high school was different. High school was more the beginning of house music for me because, I mean, that would have been '86. So, I mean, the rave scene didn't really hit Chicago until like '91 were the beginnings. '92 was when it hit hard. So by that point, I was in my 20s. But I
Hmm.
mean, like that. But the beginning of the rave scene and kind of the feeling there was that I say it in the Under the Electric Sky, the EDC movie. It really was as simple as these were all the kids that ate lunch by themselves, and we all found each other. It was like, whoa, like wait a minute, like there's like a whole culture of nerdy kids who were all outcasts, and felt out of place and out of time. And then we all found each other, and it really, I mean, for a lot of the people that I know and that experienced it, it really truly saved our lives. I mean, I don't know what would have become of me rotting away in suburbia if I had never found house music. Like, I honestly don't have an answer for that. Like,
Right.
it was really the answer to everything for me because, I had just found such solace in being on a dance floor at 3 in the morning with my eyes closed, and if a hi-hat came in just right or a bass line dropped at just the right time, like that was all I needed. That carried me through the whole next week. And it really was just that simple. We lived for the music, we lived for the culture, and we lived for each other. And I think that was that was such an incredible experience to be involved in something that was so immersive. And I feel like I hope that that still exists. From my perspective, it does.
Mm.
When my wife and I go out into the crowd at EDC and at Ultra, we see it. We see kids, and they are in
Yeah.
it. They are feeling it, and they are really experiencing it on that level. And I think that's great. And as long as that continues, we're fine.
Right. Now, and you mentioned that the 3 points that stood out to me, at least, from your description was that, you loved it for the music, you loved it for the culture, and you loved it, just for each other. And I know you did say that currently you feel like that's still alive, but are there certain elements within those three criteria that you think are weaker than particular other elements, I suppose?
Well, I mean, the one thing that I always hearken back to, which a lot of people don't like to remember it this way,
Hmm.
but it's always been the same. Like there's always been the same ratio of people that were there for the right reasons as there were, people just hanging out who, were told it was the cool thing to do or were there to pick up chicks or score drugs or whatever else. Like
Right.
that's, the ratio hasn't really tweaked. It's like there's, we didn't call them bros,
Right.
back then, but it was the same thing. You know what I mean? Like there were just as many, tourists that were just kind of rolling through, no pun intended, like for the scenery. And it was, but I do feel like that core is still very strong, and I think that's important. That as long as we have that core, then we still have a scene.
Absolutely. I think that's actually a phenomenal point you brought up there. I would agree. I think it has always been there. I think it will always remain to be there. It's just kind of the nature of how this segment of music works. I think that's a very reasonable explanation there. And I guess moving a little bit onwards from there, kind of in the early stages of your own personal music career, you started going throughout nightclubs and I mean, not necessarily underground raves, but it was actually starting to develop into a more established kind of structure. And when you were doing this early touring, you definitely had kind of a battle to fight to some extent between your sobriety and also managing to be professional in the respect that you had to go out and play these shows throughout the country. So tell us a little bit about that struggle or even that kind of enlightenment period throughout your early stages of your career.
Well, you know what? I mean, you said something really funny there. You said professional. I mean, this music didn't become professional until like the middle of the 2000s. Like there was nothing to be professional about. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, at those times, the promoters partied harder than the DJs. So I mean, there was no one to kind of like be professional to, really. I mean, like, and plus expectations of like what a DJ set were very different then. You could show up with a crate of the most whacked out, far out records, and people were not upset that you didn't play records they didn't know. That was like not something that ever came up. Like now, with bottle service and nightclubs and everything else, like people have these expectations going in, that if they don't hear the EDM hit parade, like they're complaining to somebody who works at the club. And, these things didn't exist back then. So, I mean, you could stumble in, half or fully in the bag and play a set of music and you would be fine. As far as my sobriety goes and kind of my situation, I took a good look at myself and I said, well, and it was really strange because it literally was just a year or two before the kind of big room electro started to happen. So like when Justice and Mastercraft and the beginnings of the Ed Banger stuff all started swirling around in the in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. I took it upon myself to really take a deep breath and say, you know what? Like, if I'm going to continue to do this and if I'm going to have a place in this, I have to get my shit together. And I have to, like, really figure out if I can exist in this business sober. And this year, coming up in April, will be my 10-year anniversary of sobriety. So it's been a decade. And, at first I was terrified because I had never spun records or had never stepped foot in a party sober. You know what I mean? Like I was a heavy-duty partier. And one of the things that's to note is that I never succumbed to peer pressure. I never did drugs or drank because I wanted to be like part of the crowd or I wanted to fit in.
Sure.
I did them because I loved to fucking party. I mean, it was just simply that. You know what I mean? Like I was just someone who loved to have a good time. And my ability to have a good time was overtaken by my, unquenchable thirst for vice. So, I mean, like, if I was going in, I was going in. And I didn't party every day. I mean, sometimes I would only go out once or twice a week. But when I did, I'd come home at 2 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was full on.
I believe you. I believe you.
Yeah, I mean, but you know what? I mean, I very, very wholeheartedly believe in personal responsibility, and I believe in personal choice. I would never preach to anybody that there's any path that they should take. I don't think that anyone should do this or that or not do this or that. I'm not that person. But however, I do think you need to take a long, hard look at yourself, and you need to think about what it is that you do. And if you're hurting yourself or your family or the people who are close to you, then you need to, like, assess what's going on in your life.
Right.
And now it's a lot easier than it used to be honest about having a problem like this. Years ago, like it was, there was a weird stigma to it. Now, with prescription drugs and everything else, like there's more people who have problems than don't have problems. So stepping up and saying that you need help is nothing that you should be ashamed of. Like if you feel like you're drowning, like, put your hands up and talk loudly and make sure that the people around you know and get help. and you'll get better. I mean, you know, I can tell you it gets better. So do it.
Absolutely, I think that's good advice, and I see a little bit of a correlation from what you just said and your own push into sobriety, because as you said, you're approaching on 10 years now, but when you made that decision 10 years ago, what factors did you personally feel impacted your decision to really move into a different direction as far as your use of alcohol and drugs at that point in time?
I mean, you know, honestly, it was like this. They always say that, like, you know, the only way to, like, let, you know, new and better things into your life, you have to make room for them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I got sober in April of 2005, and just about 1 year later, I met my wife. And, you know, I can tell you that if my wife and I had met at any other time, we either would have partied each other to death, or we would have never gotten along. So, I mean, you know, it made for that opportunity. And I'm just very lucky that I was able to figure out a space for that, and just being proactive about it. Like, it's not like I was thinking about that or anything, but, you know, when I finally made room for that in my life and in my mind and in my heart, it appeared. And, you know, that's some cosmic stuff, you know, like, but I'm very thankful that I did. Where are you? Get over here. This is my beautiful wife and our dog Chloe. That's
Hi,
Danielle.
guys.
That's
Hi.
little Chloe. Hey, baby.
Hi.
But yes, I mean, I think that I would have never had space in my life for that. But you know, I mean, in the midst of all of this, you have to remember, like, you know, music is great, and all of that is fantastic, and, you know, the culture surrounding this is great too. But you do need to think about the fact that there is more to life than the party.
Yep.
And I think that kind of, you know, that's where all of these other things come in, you know, doing my charity work and activism and everything like that. You know, I mean, that just pushes that agenda even more so.
Right, and actually that's a great segue, because that was going to be, the next thing on our agenda here. And I obviously there's been, I mean, recently in the news there's been numerous, I guess, hotbed issues that everyone's been talking about, regardless of what side you're on. And I know that you, across Twitter and just in general, have been very, very vocal about a variety of different issues. But one that stands out recently is your personal involvement in, the Black Lives Matter campaign and everything that gets tossed into that category. And, you not too long ago were involved personally in the protests in New York. And, as someone who may not be, familiar with personally being a part of a protest, how would you explain that? That experience too.
Well, I mean, I can tell you this. I had a moment. It was the night after the Darren Wilson verdict was released, and I was in Times Square with Daniela and Chloe. Chloe comes with us to all the protests. We are peaceful protesters, so there's no reason why we can't bring our dog.
Right.
And she's been with us the whole run. But we were, yeah, exactly. We were in Times Square, and I was marching up a wall of about 200 New York City policemen. There's about 100 long and about 2 deep. And I just remember screaming as loud as my voice would go, "New York is Ferguson, and Ferguson is New York." And the look of absolute terror in those policemen's eyes was, you could feel it, and you could see it, and it was very obvious. But in that moment, I realized something. I realized that, A, people have an immense amount of power that they don't realize that they have. Like, we all have a voice, and our voices count. And the more voices there are, the louder it is. And this is an incredible thing to realize. Like, we've all been taught over the years that it doesn't matter if you vote, it doesn't matter if you do these things. Like, we've been discouraged in so many ways to not participate. And that's absolutely false. We've been sold an absolute lie on that behalf. It matters so much that you participate. And it doesn't matter if the best you can do is retweet things on Twitter. If you can get off your couch and get in the streets, that's great too. You know, every part of the spectrum is important, but everyone's voice matters. And in that moment, when I saw that fear in the cops, it made me realize that police know how to deal with violence. If you're violent, they know what to do with you. They smack you in the head and they lock you up. It's very, very easy for them to do that. But if you are non-violent and you are protesting and you are rightfully angry about something, they have absolutely no idea what to do with you because they weren't trained for that. They were trained to diffuse chaos. But we're not being chaotic. We're being very smart. And we're using the rights that we all have as citizens of this country to peacefully protest. What?
Like, you're talking about how important everybody's voice is, and everyone's voice is important, especially now on social media. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you have 50 followers or 5 million followers, if you're famous, if you're not famous. Your voice matters. Somebody wrote to us 2 years ago and said that we should watch something, and it was about the food industry, and it's called Earthlings. And that person, and I don't know who they are, but I still would like to thank them, we're vegetarians now because of that one person.
Wow. From a tweet?
From a tweet. A tweet saying, hey, watch the trailer for this, and we've never gone back, so don't think that your voice doesn't matter out there. And use it for something good. Like, just because, like, don't troll online. You can do something positive, and you can change somebody's life. You changed ours with one tweet. So just think about that when the next time you sit down in front of your computer and you write something, because it does matter, and you have the power. And don't let anyone tell you you don't.
Thanks, baby.
You're welcome.
I mean, it's incredibly important as we move through all of this technology and all of these changes in our lives to know that at the end of the day, the main thing that matters the most is communication and love.
Right.
And it's so simple. You know what I mean? And boy, does this go back to Plur. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, how could I, as a raver, as somebody who participated in the earliest stages of house music in Chicago and loved that music that came from the struggle of black and Latino people, how on earth could I not step up and fight for their rights? That would make me the biggest hypocrite in the world.
True.
Like, you can love the EDM and not have a connection to that because EDM was a rebrand from house music. And they did that on purpose because there's no way that America ever would have bought into something that had roots in black and Latino gay culture. It never would have flew. There never would have been a Calvin Harris in this country. There never would have been all of these other hit records in this country if it wasn't for that. So they had to rebrand it. But if you are from house music and you love house music and house music changed your life, then if you are not a part of Black Lives Matter and if you are not a part of these protests and if you are not part of the Twitter storm that is going on around this, then you have a lot to think about because, house music is here because of our black brothers and sisters. It wouldn't be here without them. So never forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, as someone like myself who, I wasn't even exposed to any sort of electronic music until the year of maybe 2006, 2007, to be quite honest with you. It's hard for someone of my generation to necessarily, I mean, I've learned about the history, I've learned about the roots, but I think it's really interesting to go back and hear the perspective of someone who's lived through kind of the progression of the music from, as you said, the roots in Chicago with house, and to the progression on where it is with EDM at the moment. And I think it is incredibly important to look back and understand the history and make sure that that there's not in a certain sense not ignorance floating around and where the music came from and who's responsible for it. So I do think that's incredible insight on the history there. And I think to move on to really just the last little segment here, you mentioned earlier that it's a fantastic way or Twitter is a fantastic way for millennials and for anyone in general to get involved. I know we always offer live questions on Twitter, and I think we've got a couple here. If you have some time to answer a couple quick questions here.
Sure.
Let me pull them up. So it's actually one question, but it's in a couple parts here. It's by Justin Edge in LA, and it says, do you agree with the comparison that the explosion of dance music today is similar to that of hip-hop in the late 90s, early 2000s? And he says that, in addition, with all this is, I guess, kind of a separate question, but it's continued, but it says, with all the chaos in the world in the last few months with Ferguson and everything along those lines, how do you think this will affect music in the future?
What an excellent question. Whoever that is, high five.
Absolutely.
I'll gladly take that. I think that, I mean, of course, there's tons of parallels between this and hip-hop. I mean, A, came from black culture, so you've got that. B, I love the fact that anyone would compare this to hip-hop, because look where hip-hop is now. That means that we've got a long way to go. That means we've got decades. And I truly believe that. I really, really do. I don't think that any of this is going anywhere anytime soon. I think it will morph and evolve. And come on. I mean, look at hip hop. I mean, did hip hop stay the same? No. I mean, hip hop reinvents itself. Every week there's a new record out where everybody flips their shit and goes, oh my God. Now it's over here, and now it's over here, and now we've got trap guys making pop music. Yeah. So there's a whole new frontier of that's only just beginning. So yes, there's a lot of connection to it. I hope that in that way, I would love it if there could be a Public Enemy, an Arrested Development, a Diggable Planets, bands De La Soul who made people think and really kind of took it away from just being party music and made it music that you could listen to and really, understand something more than just going out and having a good time. Like I think that that's the next level for this. There are so many people making music now, and I believe the new frontier of this is going to be socially conscious music that's going to come of this. I mean, there's no way that these kinds of things can keep happening and then someone not standing up and saying, you know what, I've had enough of this. I'm gonna put my own twist on this, and I'm gonna serve it back up with a socially conscious agenda. And I mean, I welcome that greatly. I'll be playing those records. You can
absolutely.
So I mean, I mean, I do believe that things are about to change in a major way, and I think for the better.
Definitely. I mean, it's an incredibly exciting time right now in just electronic music in general. I think there's so much going on, even outside of music, that is, as you brought in is affecting, how the music's being made and where the music's going to go, or actually, in fact, where the culture, where everything's going to go, quite honestly. And I think that that's just incredibly intriguing to kind of think about and to see where that goes. But, to kind of wrap things up, I wanted to, really thank you for taking some time out and speaking to us. I know that there's so much more we definitely could talk about here, but unfortunately we got to condense it down into a little piece here. But,
Have me back.
Absolutely. There's so much more to cover here. But,
I do want to say one last thing.
Sure.
It's very important to me that I get one last kind of point across,
Mm-hmm.
and that is we are a part of something that is so incredibly powerful. It's changed the world in the short time that it's been a truly global sensation, with the U.S. finally kind of waking up and jumping on board like 5 years ago. Like, it is now truly global. And the amount of power that we have as a culture is immense. And it is our responsibility to take that freedom and that feeling of absolute perfection that we feel when we're dancing to this music. You have to take that with you and keep it with you through the week. And you have to pass this music on to everybody that you know, and you gotta get everybody in. We gotta get everybody to come to the party, because it's not just a party. I mean, people walk out of these experiences changed people. Like, it changes their center of gravity. Like, it makes sad people happy. It takes, it gives focus to people who are absolutely confused and all over the place. And I feel that it is so incredibly important that we are living in a time where there is something that is this culturally relevant, that's this good of a fucking time. That doesn't happen very often. I mean, I've been around for 43 years. There has not been a lot of things that have gone on in popular culture that are fun. Like, this is actually an incredibly good time. And all we need to do is tighten it up a little, get a little freaky with it, stop trying to make, if everybody just stopped trying to make so many big hit records and started getting weird and started making the music they want to make, which will come, like everyone, it's just a matter of time. But when that happens and we can all get to enjoy all that, the whole world is going to change with it. And I can't wait. I've waited for this my whole life, and I'm still the biggest fan.
Absolutely. It sounds like there's just so much on the horizon right now, and as I said earlier, it's exciting. There's very few words that can kind of replace that feeling. So, as I said earlier, thank you so much for coming on here, giving some time, and I'm definitely crossing my fingers here that we'll be able to get you back on at some point to kind of discuss, like, there's so many other things. You're just an incredibly interesting guy that, if we could have this thing run for maybe with some like food and sleep breaks, but otherwise I appreciate it, and I'm wish you the best of luck in everything that you're doing right now. And for any of the other remaining viewers here, we also have Michael Brunn is our next episode, and that'll be on January 21st. So definitely, give a round of applause to Tommie Sunshine for his awesome insights today, and definitely we'll see you back soon.
Take care, everybody.
Take care.